The sun is up, the day is wide open, and life still has so much to give. Every laugh, every step, every shared moment says the story is still unfolding beautifully. You are not finished yet. Your story continues.
Most people think life follows a straight line. Education, career, retirement. But for many, that line changes. Sometimes by choice, sometimes by circumstance, and sometimes by a moment they never expected. This is Not Finished Yet, a podcast about people who started again and discovered their most interesting chapter was still ahead. Each episode shares real stories of reinvention, the risks, the decisions, and what it actually takes to build something new later in life. Because the truth is, you're not starting from scratch, you're starting from experience. Can I just add that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily reflect those of any organisations, employers, or partners connected to them. Before we start, a quick note. A large number of people who listen to the podcast haven't yet subscribed. If you find these conversations valuable, hit subscribe or follow on your platform. It makes a huge difference and helps us keep sharing these stories. Now, let's get into this week's story. Welcome back to Not Finished Yet, the podcast for people who know there's more. Today's episode is about something most people skip, but it's the reason they stay stuck. So today we've got Scott, all the way from Texas, 30 years in education, founder of Inspired Stewardship, expert in helping people move from working to living their calling. So Scott, welcome. Thank you very much for coming on. Most people try to change their life without really understanding themselves. Why is this such a problem?
Yeah, I think a lot of times we end up living out what either society or other people tell us is success, tell us what we want. You know, you need to make a lot of money, you need to live in a certain place, you need to have a certain kind of car, you need to have a certain kind of house, you have whatever. You know, it's all of these external things that get put on us that's the right way. You know, that's the measure of success. And I've seen a lot of folks get trapped in this idea of chasing someone else's purpose for themselves or chasing someone else's dream. And so when it comes down to it, if you don't know what your dream is, if you don't know what your purpose is, if you don't know what I call your calling is, then it's really easy to chase somebody else's because you don't even know what yours is, you know? And so it comes back to the first step is to actually do that deep internal work of figuring out, what am I supposed to be when I grow up? You know, what are my dreams? What are my passions? What are the things that God has put on my heart to do? What are the things that I really measure as success? Because otherwise you end up chasing the wrong thing simply because you've never done the work to figure out what the right thing is.
Well, let's start at the beginning of your journey then. So you spent nearly 30 years in education. So what made you step away? What was the moment you realised I'm not fully aligned with this?
So it's interesting. I've had the pleasure of always going from something that I loved to something that I loved more. I'm not one of those folks that has woke up one day and gone, oh, I just absolutely hate this. Now, again, any career, any job, anything in your life, there's always parts of it that you don't like, or there's parts of it that are dreary, and there's parts of it that, you know, like I tell people, the laundry still has to get done, you know? Nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, yay, I get to wash socks today. Or I'm not going to say nobody, because there's probably somebody out there that does, but most of us don't. And that kind of feeling is not really what happened. But what has happened is, as I went through education, I was able to think about, you know, what are the things about this that are in alignment with what I'm designed to do and how I'm designed to do it? What are the things that are out of alignment? And then what can I do to move more into alignment? And in my case, there was a step in between. I actually left education and went into the corporate world for 11 years, in part for monetary reasons, for financial reasons. But even there, it was like, okay, I know this may not be where I am the rest of my life, but I need to be able to check these things off, get rid of these barriers, so that then I have the freedom and the flexibility to be able to do things more freely, to be able to say, well, the debt's not a problem, the house is paid off, those sorts of things. Now I can pursue things, and don't get me wrong, I still need to make money, I still want to make money, but money is not the point. And so it's okay too to realize that sometimes there's a step in between that you go towards. In that process too, I found things that I could add to my repertoire, add to my learning. So while I was in education, I didn't just focus on being the best teacher. I learned about communication. I learned about leadership. I learned about coaching skills. I learned about how to motivate people. I mean, honestly, folks, if you want to learn how to motivate people that don't want to be there, go teach a sixth grade classroom. Nobody in that room wants to be there, including the teacher usually. And so it's like, and yet you've got to do something. You've got a job to do. And so you learn these skills along the way. And don't get me wrong, I didn't sit down at the very beginning and go, okay, these are the 72 boxes I need to check off to get from point A to point B. Looking backwards, I see all of those boxes that I was checking off. Looking forward, I didn't know a bunch of those boxes were there. It's more, it is accidental, but it's not unintentional. And what I mean by that is, as you uncover things, as you discover things, as you get feedback, you have to be intentional about paying attention to that stuff. That's the intentionality. But some of those things you stumble across just because of sheer random chance, or you run into somebody and somebody says something or does something and you're like, ooh. I think the mistake a lot of us make is we ignore those signals along the way. And I don't get me wrong, I've been guilty of that. I spent 11 years in corporate that probably should have been about 6 years. My wife tells me that there's about 3 years, 4 years at the end, maybe 5, where she was like, you're done. You've learned all you can learn from this. We've achieved what we need to achieve. Move on. And I was still holding on to that part because it was like, I'm not sure. I'm not ready yet. I'm not safe yet. I didn't feel secure enough yet. And so it's not a mistake, but at the same time, I was ignoring some of those signals. So when I say be intentional about paying attention to them, again, don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here holding myself up going, I was perfect at it. It's more like, I know you need to do that because I didn't do it either, And so that learning that lesson the hard way. Same thing happened while I was in the education. And by the way, the corporate job was also in education. So even though I was a classroom teacher, I was still in the education arena. Even during that time, I worked for a educational testing company, educational testing service. So I worked in there and ran teams and developed product over there.
So what does living your calling actually feel like compared to just working?
What does it feel like? That's a great question. And in some ways, it feels absolutely no different. And in other ways, it's completely different. What I mean by that is, again, there's still, now that I work as a coach and I run my own business and I've got some freedom and some flexibility, I always joke and tell people the problem with working for yourself is your boss is a jerk. It's like, you ask your boss for a day off, your boss is like, no, you can't have a day off. It's like, I'm my boss, And so I get up in the morning and there's still things that have to be done. There's still work that has to be done, some of which is dreary and some of which is not fun. So it's not different. The old joke is if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, or the old saying is. I don't think that's really true. There's still work to be done that is work. And some of that is work that, sure, you can delegate, you can hire other people, you can do all of these sorts of things. But even still, there's a certain amount of that responsibility that lies with you because you've still got to make sure it gets done. You've still got to make sure that those boxes are checked. So no matter what, there's a certain amount of work involved. That being said, the different part is when you begin to notice that you're doing more and more work that is in alignment with what I call your calling. And I can go into a little bit on, I might want to go into a little bit on career versus calling, if you don't mind, because I think a lot of us misdefine that word. But as you do more that is in alignment with your calling, you begin to discover that those things that are giving you feedback, whether it's other people, whether it's the energy that you're getting, whether it is just sort of that wake up in the morning feeling of, oh, wow, I'm meant to do this. That feedback that you get begins to click more and more and more. And it becomes less about getting things done and more about this is the right thing. It really is a feeling that's different as opposed to the mechanical day to day is different, if that makes sense. It's
Yeah.
that feeling of alignment.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, why do people focus then and more that more instead of doing the right things? Why do they do that? Why do people struggle to find time for what actually matters, you think?
I think a lot of us, for time's sake, the biggest problem we have is we say yes to way too many things. We load up our plate with stuff, and then we complain that we don't have time to make it to our daughter's soccer game, or to spend time with the wife on date night, or to spend some time on some of that introspective work that I was just talking about. I don't have time to go to the gym because, and you name the 72 things they're doing, and you go, well, if you could get rid of one of these, which would you get rid of? And they're like, oh man, there's like 42 of them I would get rid of. Okay, but why haven't you? Why haven't you said no to them? And a lot of times, again, that could be perfectionism. I'm the only one that can do this right. How many of us have said that? Or it could be literally lack of, again, spending the time to do it. So I talk about having a cycle of plan, execute, review, reflect, revise, repeat. So plan, execute, review, reflect, revise, repeat. I actually find that a lot of people are good at planning and we're good at executing. It's the rest of that loop that we don't do. So if you never spend the time to go, hey, what worked, what didn't? What was good about this? What was bad about this? What gave me energy? What felt good? What didn't feel good? Is this something I should keep doing? If we don't ever examine it with an intentionality, and that's the review and reflect part, and then we don't ever revise, well, what are you doing? You're just repeating the same thing. If you go plan, execute, repeat, there's no growth. There's no chance for improvement. There's no chance for saying no to things and saying yes to other things. It's like habits. Any habits by themselves are not good or bad. Some habits are good. Some habits are bad, right? If you're getting up every morning at 5:30 and that's a habit that you have and it's beneficial to you and it's getting you out and ready to go for the day and you're able to get up and spend some quiet time and go to work ready, getting up at 5:30 is a good habit. But for somebody else, getting up at 5:30 in the morning might actually be detrimental to them. It might be robbing them of healthy sleep. It might be because of some other external thing that's going on. It might be because of stress or other things in their life that they need to remove so that they can sleep like they're supposed to. So the getting up at 5:30 in the morning is value neutral. Until we examine it and do that step of review, reflect, revise, repeat, we have no chance of changing that behavior, changing that habit structure, and getting rid of habits that are bad and adding more habits that are good. Okay, that's good. That's what causes growth. That's what causes development. And so again, the biggest problem is that intentionality. You don't do that step of sitting down and being intentional and thinking to yourself, is this good? Is this bad? And you don't have to change it all at once. That's the other thing. Everyone wants to have a life-changing event. It's like on January 1st, I'm going to get my money straight, get my health straight. I'm going to start eating right. I'm going to go on a diet. I'm going to go to the gym 17 times a day. And you can't do it all at once. Find one small thing and change it, and work on it. And then as it begins to stick,
time or clarity.
Go ahead.
Is the issue time or clarity?
It's usually clarity. Again, time and money are not problems. Time and money just are the results of your intentionality. It's a signal when time's out of alignment or money's out of alignment. It's telling you something, but it by itself is not the problem. I hate to tell you this, but if you've got a time or money problem, you don't. The problem you have is in the mirror. It's you, because you can't manage time. You can't manage money. I hate that term, time management, because you can't really manage time. What we manage is ourselves. And that then results in time and money as a result.
It's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you talk about understanding yourself before anything else. What does that really mean? And why do you think people avoid this step?
Because it's hard. Because it's not something that is rewarded in society. We tend to think about people that, if you think about yourself, you're selfish. That's the kind of framing, right? What is it? You're a Karen. You're somebody who's self-focused. And that's not the kind of self that I'm talking about. When I'm talking about invest in yourself or spend that time on yourself, I'm talking about paying attention to the things that the feedback, the things that are coming into your world, that are those signals that I'm talking about. If your time is out of alignment, if you're constantly frustrated about that, if your money's out of alignment, you're constantly frustrated about that. If your relationships are out of alignment, if your health is out of alignment, whatever it is, pay attention to those signals. If everyone around you is telling you the same thing, there might be a reason they're telling you that. Pay attention to it. And so it's not selfish. It's not looking at yourself as I'm the most important person on the planet. It's looking to yourself to go, what is it about the way I'm living? What is it about the results I'm getting that need to be changed so that I can be more of who I'm supposed to be? And so it's a subtle mental difference, but I think the signals we get from outside is if you spend any time on yourself, you're selfish. And it's simply not true. That you could be, but you could also not be. So it's not by itself a truth.
Well, what happens then when somebody doesn't understand themselves? What in your experience?
They live unintentionally. They become a pinball. Think about a pinball. When you fire it into a pinball machine, it just kind of randomly bounces around, and external factors, the flippers and how you bump the pinball machine, that's what affects the ball. It's the same thing for us. We allow the external to control us, as opposed to recognizing that external is simply information, it's simply data, it's simply feedback, and then we need to respond to it. Here's a subtle cue. If you find yourself saying things like, I had to go to work yesterday, I had to buy a new car, I had to, whatever, right? I had to, as opposed to, I chose to. It's a signal of that. It's a signal that you're responding to the world as if it controls you, as opposed to going, wait a minute, the world is giving me data, but I get to choose my response to that data. It still may be the same action. You still may buy that car. You still may go to work, but realize you've always got a choice. You've always got that power of a choice, even in the most extreme situation. If somebody walked up to me and put a gun to my head, I know this is horrible, but put a gun to my head and said, hey, Scott, you're going to have to do this or I'm going to shoot you. There are some things that they could say, hey, do this or I'm going to shoot you, and I'd happily do it. You want my wallet? Here's my wallet. But if you told me, like, I'm going to have to hurt my wife or my son, or you're going to shoot me, I'm going to go, you're just going to have to shoot me, and I'm probably going to fight with them, because that's a line for me. I'm not going to cross that line. So even in something like that, that's really extreme, I still have the power of choice. So if that's true in that kind of situation, it's certainly true in every other situation that we have. And yet we abdicate that power and we say, the world is controlling me. And it's not that we control the world, but what we do control is ourselves. By the way, that's pretty much it. That's about the only thing in the world that you can control. Okay, yeah. You can't control your kids. You can't control your partner. You can't control yourself. And that's about it. So at the end of the day, it's giving that power up is the end result. And that's the root cause.
Yeah, thank you. Well, look, one of the things that stood out for me when I looked at your profile was something that resonated with me many years ago. I was a young manager and I used to walk in that very strict 1970s style where everyone was meant to be do the same job at the same pace and read that manual and get on with it. And I learned very on that I wasn't very good at that. I wasn't very good at my learning style. And what stood out about me was with your coaching and stuff like that, you talk about learning styles and you go into a thing called DISC that some people may not be familiar with. But I'm fascinated by learning styles. And do you feel if you're going to make a change in life, is that a good step? First of all, it's a two-pronged question, really. I'd like you to explain for those who have never heard it what DISC is, if you don't mind, on your side, even though I know, but others may not. And do you think it's a good step for people to do before they think about their next step in life?
Yeah, so I'll answer the second question first. The answer is absolutely. And by the way, whether it's DISC or Myers-Briggs or Strength Finder or what is it, 6 work styles, or there's I can give you like 1.5 million assessments, right? And they're all useful. Some are more useful than others. And depending on your specific situation and what you're trying to get information about, for sure, some are more useful than others. But they're all useful. And I always think about any of these tests as it's kind of like we're looking through a peephole and trying to kind of get a picture of some big complex thing. And all we can do is kind of peek through and see a little section of it. So we get part of the picture, but we don't get the whole picture. And in any assessment is like that. We get part of the picture. We don't necessarily get the whole picture. DISC included, by the way. That being said, I love DISC because it's simple. The reason I like it is because I can explain it to you in just a few seconds and people can actually go put it into practice. And that's the utility of it. It, for me, is the beauty of it. It's research-based. It's got a lot of science behind it. I'm a science nerd, so that's important to me. So to explain it real quickly, a gentleman by the name of Marsden, it's actually been almost 100 years. It was like 97 years ago, I think, came up when everybody was studying abnormal psychology. He said, I want to go look at normal people because it's all well and good to think about what's abnormal, but until we know what's normal, how do we know what's abnormal, And nobody had really studied it. And so he went and did observations and came up with these kind of 4 tendencies based on 2 different traits that are kind of at extremes. So the first trait is some people are more outgoing, some people are more reserved. This is not introvert or extrovert, okay? Think of outgoing as your internal energy. So if you're somebody that, you get up in the morning, you go to bed at night, get up in the morning, go. Your internal energy is usually very high. You're going to be up at the outgoing end. Other people, a little calmer, they take a little longer to process. They just kind of get things done and move through the world, but they're not necessarily running 24/7, always at the highest end. They're going to be more reserved. So would you agree some people are more outgoing, some people are more reserved?
Absolutely.
Most people say yes. Yep. The kind of X quadrant, so if you think of that on a Y, right, XY coordinate system, on the X quadrant, at one end, people are task-oriented. At the other end, people are people-oriented. And again, remember, none of these are good or bad. They just are. So task-oriented people, these are the folks that when you give them something to do, the first thing they think about is what needs to get done. They're the folks that are checking off boxes on a list. They have a to-do list. They want results. They tend to be driven by the process itself. That's kind of what's important to them. Where people-oriented people, if you give them something to do, the first thing they start thinking about is, who do we need to do this? How are we going to take care of the people? What is going to be the results of this on people? What is the people impact and people need for this situation? So again, not good or bad, just different. Outgoing, reserved, not good or bad, just different. So if you think about that, you kind of end up with 4 squares or 4 quadrants. If an outgoing, task-oriented person, in his lexicon, that was a D. These are driven people. They're dominant people. They're driven by results. This is the lead, follow, or get out of the way. This is, I want to get it done kind of people. You were talking about that 1970s style leader. That's a high D, okay? By the way, only about 10% of the population is extremely high Ds. It's a relatively low percentage of the people out there, but a lot of them are in entrepreneurial or corporate kind of environment, in leadership kinds of roles. That's not all good and that's not all bad, by the way. They don't always make the best leaders, but it's a fact. Going to the next, if you're outgoing in people, that's an I. We call them inspirational, or we call them, these are the kind of fun people. This is the life of the party. These are people that like to be the center of attention. A lot of movie stars have a lot of high I. These are folks that if somebody on the stage goes, I need a vala, before they finish the word volunteer, the eyes are headed to the stage, and some of them might actually be on the stage already, okay? They're ready to go, ready to be the center of attention. They'll try it. They don't care. They're driven by that kind of fun mentality. And by the way, that's about 20 to 25% of the population. Going down to the S, this is going to be reserved, and they're going to be people-oriented. This is the single largest group of people on the planet. They're roughly 35% of the population. This is going to be the folks that are supporters. They tend to be calm. They don't like conflict. They like things to be status quo. They like things to be kind of everyone's taken care of. It's fair. It's right, but it's right for the people. These are the folks, they tend to be the nicest people on the planet. They also tend to be, unfortunately, S sometimes stands for sucker because other types take advantage of them. So they have to be good at learning to say no. And then we go around, now we're at the C category. That's going to be task-oriented and reserved. These are the perfectionists. That's the cautious type. These are folks that want to get it right. Okay, a lot of accountants, a lot of people that are driven by process have a high C component. Again, doesn't mean accountants have to be a C, but naturally they're kind of attracted by that kind of job. They want the job where they get to check off all the boxes and say, this is right, okay? And they're good at it. So and they're about 20 to 25% of the population as well. So if you notice, by the way, that means like 60% of the population is people-oriented. Some of them are reserved, some of them are outgoing, that kind of thing, but they're over there on the people side. So getting back to why is this important? Well, first is knowing yourself, knowing what drives you. And to be clear, most of us are not purely one of these. We're a blend of 2, 3, all 4 really at different levels, and different environments can bring out different parts of us. Sometimes that causes stress because it's out of alignment. Sometimes it doesn't because it's in alignment. So you've got that kind of dynamic situation. So for me, as an example, I'm a high C, I'm a high D. Okay, but I've also learned, and this is the second part, I know that about myself. So guess what? When I'm in a leadership role, I know 60% of the people are people-oriented. If I come into that situation and I'm always task, let's get it done. We got to get it right. Here's the checklist. Here's the SOP. And I never acknowledge the people part. Yeah. I'm talking German and 60% of the people in my group are talking French. Yeah, so they have no idea what I'm saying.
One of my main questions for you was, so you're understanding that, and now you understand yourself, because I've done the same thing. My profile, it was like somebody, to be honest with you, was watching me from like a fly on the wall.
Usually, when you take a good assessment on desk, you go, "Yeah, that's right. Where was the camera?"
I use it now to get people that I take on, especially in a senior position in my company. I turn around and say, "Look, you want to read this profile about me? That's about me, so you can understand how to communicate." But with me, so how does this actually improve once you know the communication and leadership? Once you've understood,
it's also flipping it. If you are incumbent, if you know it, if you know your disc style and you know other people's, and by the way, even if you haven't given them an assessment, they're going to give you clues, okay, just in their language and how they talk and how they approach things. Guess what? If I know I've got S's in my group, I need to actually treat them like that, okay? I can't treat them like me. I mean, I can, but it's not going to be real successful. Okay.
Sure.
And so as an example, when I was in corporate, I identified who my S's were. They wouldn't let me give them a disc assessment. It was against corporate policy, but I just paid attention to people. I figured out the people that was driving them. And I literally had their name on a list. And on Wednesday, by the way, they knew all of this. On Wednesday, I would have 3 names that would pop up, and I would go visit them at their cubicle. I didn't make them come to me. I went to them. That's important for an S. Okay. And I asked them stuff like, how was the baseball game a couple of weeks ago that you told me about your kid was in? And I knew their kids' names, and I did all that. By the way, I wrote all that stuff down. Okay. Because I'm a C. I made a process out of it. Okay. I literally turned going to visit people into a process because I'm process driven. So I used what I'm good at, processes, to give them what they needed. It was a 15-minute conversation. Okay. It took me an hour to go visit 3 people. I carved an hour out of my schedule. They loved it. Okay. Because they knew when their day was. They knew that they were going to get to talk to me. They knew that I cared. I gave them that feedback and that place and that belonging. By the way, notice I didn't say I went and visited my eyes. They came to me. Okay, I don't need to go seek them out.
I was going to say, like, have you got an example of how misunderstanding someone's style can cause problems in your business?
Absolutely. I mean, so the team that I actually took over from was one of the lowest performing teams in the company when I took over from them. And when I left 3 years later, they were the highest performing team in the company. And I honestly believe it's because the leaders they had up to then were all very high D kinds of people. And the majority of that team was SC. Okay. And so they'd given all these leaders that were up here in the outgoing, kind of people. And the S's and the C's were going, why are you yelling at us? I mean, what did we do wrong? And they were trying to do what this leader wanted them to do. But the leader, again, it's their leader standing up there yelling at them in German and then mad that they don't understand them when they speak French. It's literally like that. I'm not speaking the right language. I'm not giving them the right motivation. I'm not giving them the right tools. I'm not giving them the right support. And then I'm mad that they failed. Well, that's unfair. It's literally not, it's not fair. It's judging people on performance when you set them up for failure.
And do you think that makes people...
you change.
Yeah, so do you think people, because of this, are trying to learn and grow in ways that just don't suit them?
They just don't fit. It's not that they can't learn. It's not that they can't grow. Earlier I said a lot of D's are in leadership position, and that's not necessarily a good thing because, believe it or not, high S's can make great leaders in many cases. Okay, high C's make great leaders in many cases. High I's make great leaders in many cases. They lead different ways, but they're not necessarily, quote, bad leaders. But what happens is because D's are naturally attracted to leadership, D's get promoted to leadership. And then guess what? A D recognizes a D and goes, oh, you must be a good leader. Let me promote you. And pretty soon you're surrounded by people that all think the same way and look the same way. And that's not good. As a company, if that's all you have is D's in the C-suite, you're missing on the vast majority of people that are out there. You don't think like your customer.
But do you think
put it as simply as that?
But do you think your style then, after you've learned this, I mean, I believe mine has adapted. Do you feel yours has changed once you've understood this? Did you become less of a D?
No, I'm 100% still as much of a D as I ever was. What I have adapted is my behavior around it. So I don't believe my style changed. What I do believe is as I've become better at this, I've become better at adapting. Here's why I say I know my style hasn't changed. So I have some clients that are high S's. I get on a call with them and I give them S. I get to the end of that call and I am tired, because it takes energy for me to stretch over to the S component. It's not that I can't do it. It's just I have to work at it. So think of it like a rubber band. So I'm a high CD. I'm over here on the left, side. If you put a pin where my personality is and you put a rubber band on it and you have to stretch all the way over here to the S side, I got to stretch. I got to pull. There's energy involved, and it drains me. If I'm in a room of other D's and just acting like a D, I'm not drained at the end of that conversation because I can be who I am naturally and it works, if that makes sense. When I'm talking to a client who's a DC, I just talk DC to them, and I'm real blunt and direct and, and they love it and they're fine. And I get off that call and I'm like, I haven't drained. And that's what tells me it's not my style that's changed. It's the fact that awareness of this lets you work at adapting to those other styles.
So what's the one shift that would immediately improve someone's communication, in your opinion?
Becoming aware of this. And again, I use this because what did I take? 12 minutes to explain it. You can begin to understand it very quickly. Now, mastering it can take years. I've been studying this for 15 years. But if you take the assessment and start learning to recognize these styles, it is an easy and quick way of beginning to kind of change the results that you get, because all of a sudden you stop being mad at your partner or your spouse or your kid for not understanding you. And you realize, wait a minute, I'm not even talking the right language. Of course they don't understand me. Let me shift.
Yeah. Well, look, you mentioned a framework. You called it time, talent, and treasures. You talk about that. Explain that framework for me, would you?
So again, it really comes down to, if you think about our life, there's really very few things that we have stewardship over, we have control over. And stewardship to me is not ownership, but it is management. And we can manage the results of our time. We can manage the results of our money. It's not that we manage them directly. We manage them by managing that talent component. And so that talent component is things like learning DISC. That talent component is things like learning to shift from had to chose to. It's the language part. That talent component is paying attention to the feedback you're getting and spending that time to think about your habits and be intentional and examine yourself. So at the end of the day, I include all three, but the reason I include all three is because usually the symptom for people shows up in time and money. That's what we recognize. I've got a time problem. I've got a money problem. We don't recognize that we have a talent problem. But when they come to help with time and money, I'm able to work on it and help them, but we do it through that talent component. So it's all three together, but it's really that talent is the driver.
So where do people usually get this wrong then? Do you think it's talent?
They focus on the time and money part. They focus on the result as opposed to the cause.
Yeah. So if someone feels out of alignment, then which one should they fix first? Then we're saying it's not easy to fix talent, is it? What should they do first?
One of them. Here's what I mean. Pick one thing, one small thing that's out of alignment. One time, and when I say small, I do mean small. Don't try to fix everything at once. If you've got one habit, maybe, and it could be health, it could be money, it could be whatever it is. If you've got one area of your life that you're like, that's a friction point for me, that's causing problems that are spilling out into other areas of my life. Okay, great. I'm going to work on that one thing. That may be as simple as I'm going to put some friction and some smoothness around it. And here's what I mean by that. If you've got something that you're doing that you don't want to do, create friction around it. Make it harder to do it. If you want to stop eating cheesecake, stop buying cheesecake. Create friction. Make it where you have to go out or DoorDash or something. Yes, you could still get cheesecake, but it's harder. And the minute it's harder, you have time to think about it. So that's creating friction. If it's something that you want to keep doing or you want to start doing, make it as smooth as possible. Create as little bumps in the road as possible. So example, getting up early. And I'm picking something that's deliberately kind of neutral. If you want to get up early, friction would be putting the alarm clock on the other side of the room. It's harder to stay in bed if the alarm clock's blaring on the other side of the room. Now, your partner may not be happy with you, but that's okay. We can do this for a little while. Go get up. You got to turn off the alarm. By the way, the fact that your partner is not happy with you, also friction. Smoothness, if you want to go out for a run first thing in the morning, is lay out your clothes the night before and put them right by the alarm clock. Make it where the first thing you see, the first thing you think about, there's your shoes, there's your shorts, there's everything ready to go. I might as well go ahead and put them on and go for the run. That kind of thing. So it's literally creating that, making it easy or hard, depending on what you want to do, and pick almost anything. The other part of that is if it is hard, get support. And that could be masterminds, that could be a coach, that could be other outside support. Accountability is huge.
Yeah. So you're moving towards your calling now. Them steps there, do you think they're similar? How does someone go from a job they don't love to something aligned? Do you need the big leap or small steps? What would you recommend?
So for most of us, small steps. And the reason why I qualified that and didn't make that an absolute is, yes, there are some people, let's go back to DISC, we've got different kinds of personalities. There are some people that are perfectly comfortable, they tend to be the Ds, with, okay, I'm just quitting my job and, I'm moving to Timbuktu and going to do whatever, that kind of just boom, sudden change. But for most of the other groups, for the I, the S, and the C, it's good to spend time and take those small steps to look back on your past life and start thinking about what feedback have I gotten, what information do I have about what I love and what I don't love and what gives me energy and what robs my energy, and to do some planning about, okay, what are the steps to get from point A to point B and kind of move along that, and then pick that small starting point and begin. And again, that can be overwhelming for some folks because it seems like there's 4 million places I could start. That's to some extent start, pick something, because what'll happen is you'll get feedback along the way. And as you get feedback, that'll steer that boat. Like I was talking about, for me, I can look backwards and say, oh, look, all of these steps happened. But when I was looking forward, I couldn't see all of those steps, if that makes sense. You only get the discovery.
What was holding you back? What was holding you back? What holds other people back? What's your biggest thing you come across to do with that?
The first step is the knowledge of, that intentionality, that discovering, that understanding, that self-reflection. And I was guilty of that as well. I didn't spend the time thinking about what feedback did I have. My mother tells me, dude, you've been a coach since you were 8 years old. You just didn't know it. She could see it. I couldn't, right? Because I hadn't spent that time and that effort and that introspection. So for all of us, that's the first barrier. You can't aim for a target that you don't know exists. And it's not that you're going to hit the target right away, but you can't even aim for it. You're just wandering. You're just randomly shooting out into space. And occasionally you might hit the target, but most of the time you're going to miss it. And that's kind of what happens to us. And so it's really that first step is always coming back to do the introspection, sit down with somebody, do some of those assessments that we're talking about, do some of the work to find out what is in alignment, because otherwise it's just wandering. You're wandering hopelessly. And in this case, all who wander are lost because you don't know where you're going because you've never sat down and thought about the target.
Excellent. Brilliant. Well, look, always have a quick fire round if you don't mind, Scott. We'll just one line or one word, whatever you do. There's about 4 or 5 here. So first one sign you don't understand yourself well enough.
One sign you don't understand yourself well enough. Constant frustration. You're constantly feeling frustrated.
Well, the biggest mistake in communication.
Thinking everyone is like you.
Not this is a tricky one. Disc or instinct? What should people trust more?
Disc or instinct? This is going to show my C bias, but disc, because it's backed by research.
Fair enough. Well, there's no right or wrong answers here.
No, there isn't. But yeah, if I was an IS, I'd probably say instinct. But because I'm a DC, I'm going to say this.
One thing people should stop doing immediately.
People should stop doing immediately. Ooh, boy, that's so hard because I think some things that are wrong for. Not choosing. I'm going to say that. It's the had to language, not choosing.
Okay, so then on the reverse of that, what's one thing they should start today?
Start choosing. It's a lot easier after answering the other one. Yeah, recognize that you have the power of choice. And I think so often we abdicate our power.
Excellent. Well, if someone's listening and feels stuck, overwhelmed and unsure where to start, just a last question, what would you say to them?
I would say the first place to start, if you feel stuck, is spend some time on that introspection. I've actually got some free exercises I'll be happy to share with folks as well. I actually put together all of that over on a landing page that I'm sure you can put in the show notes.
We'll put all your website and everything else on the show notes and everything, so people can find you.
Yeah, so start with some of that introspection and walk through and really be honest. Look at your time, look at your money, look at your health, look at your relationships, all of those components of life. And if you feel like there's a lot of friction, there's a lot of frustration, it's probably time to sit down and do some of this intentional work.
And what is your website, Scott? Just so we can...
You can find my website over at inspiredstewardship.com. And I actually put together the landing page is at inspiredstewardship.com/not finished, just all one word, not finished. What you'll find there are some free resources. I have a book that wouldn't hurt you to read if you're stuck in this area called Inspired Living. It's available there, as well as my podcast and other information.
And we can get that on Amazon. We can put the link there for people to grab. Can we always
where great books are found.
Yeah, no problem. That's brilliant. Well, look, thanks very much, Scott. You know, as you say, most people try and change their life before they understand themselves. You know, that's why they stay stuck. That's what we've been talking about today. Start there and everything else shifts. And remember, you're not finished yet. Thanks a lot, Scott. And we'll look forward to speaking again in the future. And anyone who wants to know more about Scott's work and what he's doing, then head over to those links that you can find in the show notes below. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Not Finished Yet. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss a conversation. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. Please see the links to all our socials. Until next time, remember, you're not finished yet.